Alan Jeff. I'm here with Wayne, an old buddy of mine who has a passion. Would you say, Wayne, passion?
Definitely a hobby.
Yeah,
Definitely a hobby.
I was kidding him earlier. I think it's an obsession, actually.
Oh, thank you very much for that diagnosis, doctor.
So, thanks for letting us come look at your train set. I mean, I've seen it lots of times, and I have so many questions, even more now. So,
thank you.
Let's go way back. Let's start
Okay.
way back. Well, where did you begin? What was your first train set? Like, did your parents have trains, or your dad, your mom, or what was the deal?
No, it was just a hobby that I got interested in. They had a hobby store in Fairmont, and I went down and visited that, and it kind of intrigued me and interested me, and I set up like most people would set up a layout on a sheet of plywood 8x4, and that was my beginning. Some pieces of tracks, some buildings, a few other additions, and all of a sudden it was just overwhelming. It just kept my interest.
Okay, so tell me, what is this again? This size? So
This is what they call HO scale,
Okay.
and it's probably the most common out there. It involves a lot of scale to size, but yet there's a lot of fantasy with this. I'll have unusual road names that were never in the real world together, but because this is my world, I can make that possible.
So how long have you been doing this fantasy world of yours?
Probably since the mid-60s.
Mid-60s.
We're talking the previous century here.
Okay. And this is not your first layout. We're going to take a close look at this, but this is not your first layout, right?
No, I thought about that today. I probably built about 4 or 5 of them now.
Yeah.
And as each one got built, I said, boy, that didn't work out. I want to do that again. Or that was awesome that I had on that layout. So I would do a continuation of that. But as far as the actual, structure of that moment on that layout, no. I usually would rebuild on a new one.
So Wayne's being modest too. A lot of people remember, our viewing audience, that he had a big part in the Model Railroad Club downtown. So if anybody had a chance to see that historically in Fairmont, it was big and cool, and you had a lot to do with that.
Yeah, and that was one of the greatest events because I got to be with other people that had the same problem I have.
What, obsession is
Yeah. And so there was a lot of commonality, and you were able to make new friends, have people you didn't know, might not have ever crossed paths in life, and now you have this bond.
Yeah.
And it's a kinship is what it is.
Well, I thought it was a really nice community thing too, because I remember always when the street ride show was on,
Yes.
you guys would be open and you could go down there, cool off, and
Yes.
just be amazed by all the
Yes,
train stuff.
and we accomplished a lot of things there. Besides promoting goodwill, we had a lot of camaraderie. Unfortunately, that club is no longer in Fairmont.
Yeah.
But it continues on.
Yeah.
In my
But the
heart.
friendships isn't that one of the most important things, really?
Yes,
I mean, you talk
it
about,
is.
we have these little items and trains, but I mean, I know you're connected with a lot of people in Fairmont that have layouts.
Yes,
They're
yes.
spread out all throughout town.
They are, and it's a bond of kinship. That's basically what it is. Because, to be serious, we're grown men playing with toys. That's okay. I'm admitting it. But what it does is we bring the real world down here into this world, and that's the I think the really neat part about it is the ability to recreate the real world down into here.
I think the connections are cool. So take us on a tour. Let's see what you got.
Okay, all right, let's take a look here.
Okay.
There is one piece of the layout that I was able to bring back from basically from an older layout, and this was this piece back here, and it was the only remnant, how would you say, of what we had here left. And it's just a lot of things piled into a tight spot, but it's my reflection of what I'd like to see on my layout.
So just walk us through downtown there. What does that
Well, this is just these are all, what do you call it, made up villages. I did want to do something, though. It's a little unusual, not a lot of railroads do, but I was influenced by road racing back in the mid-'60s.
Oh, yes.
And they were sort of poo-pooed on by the model railroaders, but I wanted to put this into it. And this is a Tyco slack car track that's going to have trucks that's going to do work. And so I did a lot of customizing cutting on the track to get it to fit into here. You know, on the club layout, we had issues where what are we going to put in this square foot? And on the home layout, it's what can you put into a square inch? You just tremendous differences in size. But also when I was building this layout, not only did I want to make interesting ground structure this way, but I also wanted to make vertical points of issue. And so then I started going up with taller, bigger buildings. And so that's why you see some of the smaller buildings. And this here too, this structure of rock that's right here, that was meant actually to start out as a view block, because I did not want to be able to see the other side of the room.
So tell me a little bit how you built this again. I know you did all this by hand, right?
Yes. This here is basically like chicken wire with plaster over it, and then painted about 3 or 4 colors. A lot of times on a scene like this, you got to have about 4 colors to make it pop. And I was inspired because we had gone down to Arizona. So these are some of the colors that I brought back, and I like the effects of that. Now some of the rocks, here's what happens when you're a model railroader. You end up having other interests, and you're having a tail wag a dog. So now I'm down in Arizona visiting with my folks who are there wintering, and now I'm collecting rocks that might fit here.
Sure.
You know,
yeah.
Or I'll go to some other place and collect, you know, the little cars or the little equipment or the trucks that might be there. Mm-hmm. You know, and so now you start collecting things to go with your layout.
So as you mentioned before, you design little scenes all over all the way down. It's not all like one continuous. There's a lot of little different.
No, the last thing I wanted to do is a lot of times when you build the 8x4 layout, you want to connect the road on one end of the table to the other road, and that's what you don't want to do. What you're doing is you're trying to do a Houdini trick here. You're fooling 51% of the human brain to say, "Yep, that's what it is." And so when you stand here, you think that you're looking at this, and what they are is what I created was vistas. Vistas with small focal point scenes on it. So I haven't worked on this yet, but there'll be all kinds of scenes as I develop here with like little workers that might be, let's say, arguing with the boss or being told to get back to work, you know. And the other one is that you've got all of life too that's out there. And so there's just a lot of different things that you can do.
Hey, I got another question for you.
Yeah.
Speaking of rocks, what about these trees? You build those?
Yeah, the tree was
you do.
They're all handmade, other than I have a few commercial trees.
Let's see, show me. Oh, these, you made these, didn't you?
Yeah, these are out of cedar shingles, and then I would cut them kind of tapered wide, and then I would take a really heavy rasp file, rough them up, drill little holes, and put this air fern in
Those
there.
are so tiny.
Yeah, well, I had better vision back then.
Wow. So neat.
Yeah, and so trying to recreate those, and then of course people will come along, and if you go out and look at trees, they're not uniformity. And one of the things about nature that you're trying to copy nature here is the what do you call it? The inconsistency of regularity. So what you have is you have a lot of things that are, you know, across the board are regular, but they're inconsistent in that effect.
I'm going to have to go home and figure out what that all means.
Well, you're a psychologist. You study that in the book. So when I created situations like this in my city here, and this was, you know, this is basically a mountain scene, but it's a city scene, you know, and your eye has a tendency to want to follow down in those streets, into those avenues there. And so that's what creates interest. If you were to stand out in the middle of a cornfield in South Dakota, you'd say, this is boring. But when you go to the Grand Canyon and you look down into those canyons, you say, this is, you know, this is what I'm looking for. So it's the anticipation within the human mind to draw out all these things that make this interesting.
So this is like an art form.
It is. And I'm trying to capture the real world. That's why I have the moon on here. And I have the sun. And we'll demonstrate that right now. We'll turn a button on here that's supposed to be working for me. There, I paid the bill. This is my sunset right here that I can bring up, and I can bring the light down so that we can have, one of the most beautiful times of the day is the sunset. I'm usually not up early enough to have a sunrise, but a sunset. Just think about that. And you can control it for, it's getting later and later. And then it's gone.
Well, I'm sleepy already.
Well, you've had your Somonex, I guess. Take Somonex and sleep tonight. And so now I'm working on lighting some of the buildings up. And I think I got a switch here somewhere. And these are some of the buildings here. Now I got to work on street lights and other light. And I had a large building here in this downtown area. And I decided it wasn't functional. It was this building over here. So I decided to move it here. Well, then that changed everything. I mean, then I started having, because you're trying to make stuff that's realistically makes sense.
How long did you say you had this layout kind of basic built?
I built this in about 2.5 years in the turn of the century, 2002, when we moved here. And this room was nothing. It wasn't even, walls weren't even here, sheetrock wasn't here, wiring wasn't here. So I had to first envision what I had here, what I wanted to build. And of course it wasn't big enough. The original plan was to be the whole basement. But I wanted to stay a happily married man. And it's important that...
So, are you telling me that this never... you're still doing stuff. Does
Yeah,
it never
I
end? Are you always creative
yeah,
and making new?
Yeah, and sometimes I get lazy and I just want to come in here and run trains. And just, enjoy train watching. There are people out there that enjoy the hobby of switching. But to me, that was too much like work. Like I was going back to work. And I didn't like that. So I just stay with the train watching. And it's a passive hobby of collection.
Well, let's watch one.
All right. We'll turn some juice on. We'll get a train going here. This happens to be one of my favorite ones, the Rock Island.
Rock on, man.
Almost had a crash right there. You gotta forgive me, but whenever you run a layout for public, gremlins appear.
Knock things over.
Yeah, things don't work the way they're supposed to, so that happens.
Way goes with anything, right?
Yep. So now this train comes through here and it's gone now. And you say, well, this just happens to be a scene that a train goes through. So what I've built is the world, and trains just happen to go through them. Or cars, or people, or life. So that's what I got. So I put a grate in here and I made this just so it could creep up over this hill. I gave names to the place, Pine Ridge Pass. They're just all fictitious places. So I have other model railroad friends, and they would come over, and they'd observe it too. But there's a certain amount of mischief that's in model railroads, and that is the mischief of life. And so I went over...
I think that's your mischief.
Yeah. I would go over to my friend's model railroad, and I would change his little focal scene, or I would add something more to it.
And what did your friend think about that?
He would come right over and do the same to me. And I thought, well, this is interesting. So when he first got
I think
going,
I participated in one of those
Did you?
mystery
Okay.
things. Yes.
and there was something really interesting I wanted to show you, Kevin. This is what good friends will do for you. They'll bring over something of theirs and put it on your layout, and especially if you don't know about it. So it might be a few days, might be a few weeks. And he put a UFO. So I brought up the army over there on the left. And so he came back and he put little green men to fight them. And so this is how the fantasy of this world can sometimes be. And so some of the events are real and some are not. Here's an event we had over here. We had she does calendars, apparently for, you may have to edit this because this could be a little X-rated here, but it's real life. And the young men here in his hot rod car, he's trying to talk those ladies into a ride. But their dog will have nothing to do with that. So this is a focal scene right here. Here's another one. They've been waiting forever for this phone. Back in the old days when you went to a payphone, you had to wait until your turn. Well, finally he left. His long call was probably a bad, tragic call to his girlfriend. But this is how life is, and you bring it back onto here. So this is my hobby.
So tell me too, you mentioned earlier about the track. Is this HO?
Yes,
track
and
too?
this happens
for
to be-
cars, not trains.
Right.
You got HO cars.
This
with
is
that.
the Aurora track, which originally came out in the 60s, which was the first slot car track I had. And then there was another competing company called Tyco. So I've also got a Tyco on the other side of the layout.
So
here.
it sounds like you have a lot to tell about HO cars too.
Oh,
huh?
and that's another hobby. Let me tell you.
Well,
Another hobby.
this certainly is a big time passion hobby for you.
A work in progress. Always a work in progress. And it's enjoyable because the nice thing about this hobby is you can come in here, enjoy it, you're done, or you got to go do something else, turn it off, and you walk away, and it's right there when you left it the same way. So that's one of the nice advantages of it.
So thanks for showing me. This is really fun.
Yeah,
thanks,
Kevin,
hey,
thanks for coming over. I really appreciate it.
It's really fun. So,
Yeah.
all right, back to you, Al and Jeff.